Psychology student here. I got the chance to sit in on the interrogation, on a monitor in the other room, of this guy who was clearly off. He seemed like a normal enough guy, cracked a joke about the bland room and sat down, smiling like how politicians do, just that fake but somehow authentic smile. I thought he was actually innocent at first because most people I've seen interrogated who are guilty are really quiet, shy and nervous, but he was confident and relaxed. To make a long story short, he was a 20-some-year-old who shoved his mother into the corner of a wall, her head cracked open and he watched her bleed out. Through the whole interrogation he was laughing and smiling. You could clearly tell he felt no emotional connection to his own mother, and had no guilt about anything he'd done. When telling that he kept thinking about how killing people would be more fun than lame animals, stray cats and dogs and everything else he could catch. Only 11 years old. Go on? Sorry, didn't see your comment. But yes, this is really disturbing. The abuse and stuff he did to those poor animals are something I can never hear about without being devastated. He talked about people, mostly the people from his school that were annoying, like they were things, never talked about people or animals like they are living, breathing beings. This is a large red flag. He also said about the strays he killed and tortured, well, I guess they don't have to die and all, but it is just to pass the time, you know. My mum worked with a boy, 12 to 13 at the time, who had killed animals. He'd abuse a sheep then cut its throat. He'd molested his younger brother. He was big for his age and wouldn't be allowed to be alone with female staff because he would always try to manipulate them and test his strength against them in subtle ways. He'd try to hug them but squeeze to see if they were strong enough to get out of it. They would often find drawings in his room of women tied up and mutilated. He wasn't allowed human-like toys anymore because he'd always destroy them, hang them, tie them up. The staff have all said it's only a matter of time before he actually kills a human, and at present there's nothing they can do about it because when he hits 16 he'll no longer be in their care. They had a certain degree of sympathy for him due to his upbringing. His mother was a junkie and would often sell him and his brother to pedos. They'd pick the boys up in a car, take them away, abuse them and then bring them back to her. Disgusting. One of my biggest regrets in life is suggesting to my middle school-aged niece, many years ago, that she would be an excellent psychologist, and she would be able to help people that no one wanted to help. After listening to years of her stories about the unimaginable horrors these children suffered, and all the times she was hurt/beat up by the children in the hospital. I'm so glad she took an alternative path so she doesn't have to deal with all of that misery anymore. It's not good for you. God bless the people who are strong enough to keep helping people with mental illnesses. God will reward you. Clinical psychologist here. At first I didn't know. If anything, given the context, he was more put together than most of my patients. The subject of his criminal past came up. I only knew he had served prison time some years before, not what he was in for. I had met with him a month or two when this came up. Turns out it was 2 separate sentences served. Both were for rape. In both cases he was the exact thing we are afraid of, a guy lurking in a dark alley jumping a drunk girl. He told me about these things as if he was talking about the weather. When it dawned on me that he expressed no remorse or guilt whatsoever, I got the same cold, gut-wrenching kind of primal fear you feel when you're out for a walk and almost step on snake. Current psychologist working in a prison here. I've worked with 3 individuals I dare say would have met the criteria for antisocial personality disorder within the last 2 weeks. One commonality is that they use behaviors as tools to benefit only themselves. Self-harm not because they wish to hurt themselves but to use it as a tool to lure staff into the cell to incite violence/gain extra medication/be sent to the SHU, which comes with a status. If he was lonely and wanted someone to talk to, is it really sinister that he would get you a chair so you would hang around longer? Just seems like something anyone might do. For sure, this is just a small example of manipulation and impression management. Not a psych, but I was in the room where my mum was being evaluated. Well, I wasn't in the room. It was like a police interrogation room with a one-way glass. I was there because they needed to interview me for an outsider's perspective. Anyways, my mum got arrested on suspicion to commit a violent crime. To set the scene, she was handcuffed to a table and she was pissed. She's always had volatile anger issues due to heavy drug and alcohol use. She was being talked to, questioned, all this other stuff. I was there for about 3 hours. She kept running this lady in circles to divert her from the actual problem. She was insanely calm, answering questions about various things that would scare a normal person. She barely showed empathy for anything and it was terrifying for me to watch. I knew she wasn't right in the head anyways. She was abusive to both my brother and I, but seeing how she handled the situation at hand, I'm glad I got out of there or it would have gotten much worse. I haven't talked to her in about 4 years, but she's tried to get in contact. I can't trust her and don't think I ever will again. You feel it in your gut first. Using a validated measure, and constructing a thorough case history to discuss in supervision, this is how you test your gut feeling. But you feel it often quite quickly. It tends to begin with just a sense that something is off. When you're doing therapy with someone, we tend to build up quite a strong rapport with people. So there's lots of micromimicry going on, and you start to tune in quite deeply to unconscious body language. When you're in this state, sometimes you just start to feel very uneasy and you can't articulate verbally exactly why yet. This is often because of subtle micro-expressions, super fast flashes of emotion, lasting fractions of a second, that we perceive, but don't consciously register. You see flashes of contempt-related emotions and burglar smiles, basically emotions related to dominance and deception. The next thing you'll notice is a lot of use of projection going on. This starts quite quickly, usually in an assessment session. As an aside, being assessed by someone else can feel quite threatening to anyone's self-image, let alone a psychopath's. Quite predictably there will be status challenges, asking you about your credentials, your experience etc., and then often some put-downs and digs with plausible deniability, e.g. joking that all psychologists are mad themselves, or just turning the tables by asking who's the maddest person you've ever treated. You start to feel on the back foot and like you're now being assessed by them. As time continues, they will attribute a lot of their own emotions to you as the projection deepens. Commenting that you look sad, asking if you're okay, or conversely asking why you got angry just then. As time passes, their affect turns from micro-expressions to more overt dominance displays, leaning back, smirking, getting up and striding around etc. By this point your initial gut feeling is getting more supportive evidence and it's time to bust out the validated measures. The biggest sign of all is a general unwillingness to show any vulnerability at all, or to be in a one-down position. The engagement will be superficial, often pally or matey, with lots of banter and joking, always flying close to the wind of outright mockery and contempt. They will start subtly and increasingly become overt in their need to control and dominate the therapy sessions. If the therapist maintains an aloof control, the ante may keep being raised and even end up with overt intimidation of the therapist. Not a psychologist, but a nurse who sees way too many psych cases. One time I had a PT who was brought in after trying to break into a family's house while they were home. He was on my telemetry unit because his electrolytes were out of whack and he was acting like he didn't remember trying to bust into an entire family's house with them home. He was getting antsy, but the hospital I worked at had a stupid fall risk policy that kept patients in bed, even if they were young/healthy/capable of being responsible for their fall. Mental health patients like to pace, especially when they start to feel like they're using it. So, anyway, I'm trying to keep dude in bed because if his feet touch the floor a loud alarm would go off, pushing his crazy ass closer to the edge. So, I'm in there trying to talk to him and de-escalate. We're talking and he tells me he is a bad person, that his cat was mutilated and his sister asked what happened to it and he told her the dog did it. But, he told me that his secret is that he did it. He killed the cat so bad that it looked like a dog ripped it to pieces. He also shared with me that he knew what he was doing when he tried breaking into the family's home, and that he wants to hurt people. Of course, I shared this info with the hospitalist and the psychologist and, naturally, he was discharged free and clear the next day. No follow-up with the law or outpatient psych. Gotta love it. I am a mental health professional working in corrections, max security facility. In my experience, psychopaths will have this predatory stare, especially when they are trying to manipulate you. It is completely unnerving and hard to describe to someone unfamiliar with this population. They also tend to be narcissistic and overly charming, making a point to be overly friendly with you. Daughter of a psychopath and can 100% confirm the stare thing. I remember one day describing it to my mom. They divorced long ago but he was in my life till about 6 years ago, but both my mom and I kinda trying to work through the trauma of having such an abusive person around and talk about it sometimes, kind of at a loss for words to describe how fucked up and invasive? Calculating? Unnerving? It is. And her just being like, yes I know exactly what you're talking about. So can confirm. Very emotionally manipulative and abusive man, and that look came out a lot when he was trying to be scary and honestly it worked. Still have nightmares about that stare. It came out a lot when he wanted to scare us around other people without anyone else catching on. I worked with someone once who was well known. His sidekick, as we grew to call him, was void of soul. You could look at his eyes and it was blackness staring back at you, an emptiness I've seen in the eyes of known serial killers. And when you were near him you could almost feel a vibration of evil. It was almost like watching a mime when he was forced to interact with others. Exaggerated facial expressions, often mimicking the person speaking to him. And when they walked away, his face clicked off like a TV set, tuned to static. There's an Amazon show called The Boys. The main superhero character, Homelander I think, behaves exactly how you describe. It must be terrifying in real life to see. The man I was talking about was in the mob. I mean the literal mafia. Other people have commented that I was describing an autistic person. Nope, this is a 7 feet tall behemoth with hands like baseball gloves, and his job was to do anything asked of him by a certain person. Anything. Looking into his eyes was like staring into the abyss. And that's all I got to say about that. When I was a student, we had an interview with a lady that killed her baby child with a handgun because it cried so much that she couldn't take it. At first we weren't told that she was a psychopath, and we were just told to listen to her side of the story. She was reading us from her journal that she made while she was in the institution. Not once did she mention that she was sad that her baby died, or how what she did was bad. She was just reading angry taunts about her husband that left her and turned her in the police about what she did. She was justifying the killing because the baby was so unbearable, and once she mentioned that she was angry and mad that her husband did not believe her, that she didn't have any other choice but to kill the baby. She was very smart and well spoken, and the whole time she was speaking she was trying to make us feel sorry for her for being locked up. We later learned that sometimes she was lying about not killing her baby and other times just brag about it, depending on who she was speaking with. Very normal looking person and very good speaker. Edit. Wow, was not expecting this much upvotes. So to answer some of your questions. I am not from the US, and I don't think her name will matter to any of you. She was not schizophrenic nor had postpartum psychosis. If she did, she would have felt any kind of remorse about what she did, which she did not. When I said normal person, I meant it in a way that if I was talking to her in any other situation but this, in a mental institution, I would have no idea that she is a psychopath. She killed her baby only for one simple reason. At the moment it just wouldn't stop crying. She didn't try to hide it or anything. At first she lied to her husband that it was by accident, but then she admitted. I'm a psychologist, but not a therapist. However, this weekend I got called out to my sister's home because her husband was threatening suicide. I got there, freaking out, thinking that I was going to find a body, to him just sitting there sipping whiskey. He thought it was funny. I literally had my video camera out and had already Googled the sheriff's number in case I found him dead. We went inside after I chewed him the fuck out, and he tried to tell me that he never said anything about hurting himself. He convinced me that my sister was overreacting and being dramatic. Well, my sister came home a few minutes later. I made it there before her, and she started reading the texts. Tell the kids I love them. Tell them to say their prayers, their yes ma'ams and no ma'ams. Tell them not to feel sad. I want you to be happy. I don't want you to feel guilty about this. This wasn't your fault. This has always been my destiny. I'm trying to think of more, but it was basically a straight 20 minutes of this shit, and then he turned off his phone. So he basically wrote a suicide note in order to get a response from my sister and just fucking lied directly to my face about it. Then, when he got confronted in front of me, he sat there talking about how he was in trouble. He lambasted my sister for calling his parents. I suggested counseling. He went off about how no mortal man can tell him about himself. So TLDR. Yesterday I realized my brother-in-law is a complete psycho, no empathy, no remorse, focused solely on himself, willing to put other people through hell just to get his way. I knew he had issues, but this is beyond anything I suspected, and he just still can't wrap his head around how awful it was. For anyone concerned, his own mother and father got involved and they're making him stay with them until he gets some counseling. We'll see how that works out. Not really hopeful. Not a psychologist, but from my experience of dating a psychopath, didn't know until years in. A lot of what appears as emotion is simply mirroring emotions they see others exhibit and how they believe is the socially appropriate way to respond, whether or not they actually feel that way. This is how they blend in and appear normal to the average person. They are narcissistic, and everything revolves around them. They are always able to place blame on other people. Nothing is ever their fault. However, anything positive in their lives or others' lives is because of them. Because they are narcissists, they believe they are much more important than they actually are. They have strong influence over others because of their ability to feel nothing when manipulating others, and this is how they exert control over others. They will do whatever it takes in order to come out on top of a situation with no actual regard for others' lives or feelings. They may fake their feelings or reactions to continue to manipulate those around them, and they get pleasure over having control over other people and feeling like they're pulling all the strings. Often there is a particular face they make when they are relating a story, usually about how clever they are. One of the TED Talks on how to spot a liar calls it duping delight. Sometimes they can't contain their rage and you see them switch. One time I picked up a client on bail and overheard him talking to his mother. He was polite, respectful and grateful to her for posting bail. He apologized to her for the inconvenience and I thought he was going to be easy to work with. His mum paid for an expensive barrister, but the barrister didn't get the result he wanted, so he lost it on the phone with his mum. Absolute rage, telling her she had fucked him over etc. was very interesting seeing him switch when he didn't get his own way and lost control at it. To add link. We had to watch it for our criminology class. As other posters have noted, there is no evidence-based way to spot a liar. I just found the duping delight fascinating. I also see it in the faces of my young niece and nephew at times. Why would a psychopath try to get mental health treatment? Don't they think they don't need it? My dad was required to have court-ordered therapy, or something like that, when I was little because he deliberately tried to kill someone by running them off the road. The person's crime? Passing him and having a nicer car. My mom and I were in the car at the time. It went from him trying to run the guy off the road to a high-speed chase. Everyone lived. The person he talked to said he likely had ASPD, antisocial personality disorder. He had her in tears and she walked out of the room, saying she was unable to help him. I was a toddler at the time, but this was all relayed to me by various family members when I was older. We had to go into hiding because he was escalating to the point where he was sexually violent towards female family members and attempted to kill us. We were in brief contact when I was in my early 20s because his family was talking to him again, and he had started a new family with his old mistress. While his behavior had toned down and he was less violent, his personality never changed. He's incredibly narcissistic, has no sense of humor, jokes are always veiled threats, is unable to accept blame for anything, lies about everything, and feels absolutely no remorse. We were having problems where he was impersonating my underage siblings online so that he could get off on emotionally abusing me. It was my punishment for crying during a phone call. I figured it might be him, said something that hurt his ego, and his rage came pouring out. I blocked him. He contacted me once again, but from one of his multiple accounts. He went on a rant about how much he loves me, how he'd do anything for me, he'd die for me, just please talk to him, etc. I asked him if he'd be willing to go to therapy. His reply? Not interested. Blocked instantly, haven't spoken in years. He genuinely doesn't think he's ever done anything bad in his life. He's not the problem, it's everyone else. I'm a bit late to this, so not sure this will be seen, but my wife is bugging me to share. I actually started my career in forensic psychology, but decided to get out of it after I got stabbed and assaulted a few times by patients. I then started working with children and teens. It was there, working with an 8-year-old girl, we'll call her Sarah, that I came across my first person I'd earmark as a psychopath. Sarah came from a pretty good family and they were really dedicated to help her moving forward. The parents had no obvious concerns with their own behavior and they seemed to be pretty well-regulated folks. They had bounced across a few therapists before seeing me, most of which seemed to struggle with the fact that Sarah did not seem to be demonstrating more traditional behavioral issues. For example, she was not impulsive, she did not just lose her temper and go wild. Instead, Sarah was attentive, planning and meticulous. She was pretty textbook in that she had a long history of mutilated Barbies and some quite hurt animals along her path. The part that was a bit unique with Sarah is she rarely got in trouble for doing anything because it seemed that she was really good at convincing other children, usually those a bit younger than her, of doing things. We got my foot in the door by doing some psych testing with Sarah. I had a booklet in front of her, thing costs about $200, that we used for the tests. Sarah proceeded to slowly rip one page at a time while looking me in the eye. I have a pretty good poker face. She asked me what I was going to do about it. I said nothing. She continued. After a while she admitted that she was surprised I had not reacted yet. I told her it wasn't my booklet and that I just work here. That actually was why she stopped. The next 9 hours I spent with Sarah continued with this kind of stuff. The most uncomfortable part was that she just stared at me constantly and tried to read my face. I think she was really thrown off by my lack of expression. When she was observed with her parents, she did the exact same thing. Child Protective Services was already well involved and everyone was kind of unsure what to do about this kid. She was, fortunately or unfortunately, about to move across the country and into a heavily wooded area. I remember her dad somewhat sadly joking, at least the animals there might fight back. I remember the parents just seemed scared. About 6 months after she moved, one of the worst fires in the history of the area happened and destroyed entire towns. I've always wondered if it was Sarah.